It seems to be that for a moment Putin lost power, and it seems to be that probably Patrushev was trying, to take away some power from Putin.
Hi, I'm Maddie Hale and welcome to the Putin Files. Today I've had Dr. Yuri Felshtinsky on the program. He's the author of From Red Terror to Terrorist State. He speaks to us about Vladimir Putin's inner circle, how it came to be, how he brought so many people over with him to his presidency, who he's loyal to and who he isn't, and some of the conflict that's gone along the way in his last few decades as president. So all that today on the Putin Files. Yuri Felshtinsky, thank you so much for joining the Putin Files today.
Thank you for the invitation.
I want to start off with just talking about how Vladimir Putin operates with his team and these loyalists that he's had. So my first question is Vladimir Putin an isolated figure, or do you consider him someone that can actually work well with his team?
Well, we have to understand that Putin became president of Russia on behalf of the FSB. He was director of the FSB prior to becoming prime minister for a short time and then president of Russia. And all people around him actually are from the FSB, because the moment he became president, he started to promote to major political and government positions other FSB officers. And that's why almost everybody who is close to him is from the FSB. With time, the office of president became more powerful. This is normal, and we probably have two competing structures, the office of president and the FSB. But even the office of president also mainly recruits people from the FSB. So this is the same group. They have similar views. They support each other. And Putin, yes, he is first among equals, but he is not a dictator. He is supported by a major structure. The state security is a huge organization. What changed after 91, and this is important to understand, that the FSB now exists without any political control. Prior to 91, they existed under political control of the Communist Party. And instead of a budget which they would get from the Communist Party, they now have resources of the entire Russian Federation as resources used by the FSB for their political goals and programs.
So do you consider Putin's inner circle from the start of his presidency, Yuri, to now to be people that he's worked with for a number of decades? He really tries to promote from within.
Well, he is, of course, very powerful. Those people who are around him are very loyal to him. I'm sure that he would not keep around those who are not. And we see some questionable situations, like with Yevgeny Prigozhin, for example. But basically, this is the institution of the FSB, which is ruling the country, and I think they are very happy with Putin, because for 25 years he is securing for them the power which is enough to control a major, superpower in the world, a nuclear power, Russian Federation, which is a very rich country. So they are not only powerful, but they are also, all of them are very, very rich, and they are using those money as much as they could. Well, it became more difficult after invasion of 22, but basically they're very happy with the results. They were trying to get power in Russia and to hold power in Russia, and they're doing this quite well with the help of Putin.
Because I think, Yuri, a lot of everyday news consumers have questioned why Vladimir Putin hasn't been assassinated, whether he rules by force, whether his immediate team and inner circle actually believe what he's saying, actually have the same ideologies as him. But from your understanding, they do respect him, they do believe his message.
Well, I of course do not know if there were any thoughts coming from the FSB or within the FSB about assassination or removing of Putin. This is theoretically possible, um, but at the same time, there are actually no political forces in Russia which are able to take Putin down. This was done on purpose. Russia is the only country where the state security is in charge of the government and in charge of the country. There are no examples in the world when state security would run a state. Russia is the only state where political parties do not fight for power. They fight for, places in Russian parliament, Duma, because, this helps them to enrich themselves, but they do not fight for the position of president, for example. They just do not fight. The opposition is destroyed. Those people, those leaders who become obvious competitors to Putin are killed, like Boris Nemtsov, like Navalny recently. So there is no opposition. Those people who would like to participate in political life in Russia are forced actually out of Russia, and we see a lot of them abroad now because it's extremely risky after the murder of Navalny. Everybody realized that it's extremely risky to fight for political power in Russia. So it's very quiet, and the only power which exists, really, the only power is the FSB, because the Russian army, for example, never played any political role historically, and never played any political role in the history of Russia. So the only power, once again, is the FSB. So if they decide for one or another reason to remove Putin, they probably are able to do this, but I'm sure they're quite happy with what they see.
I want to get into some kind of prominent figures that have been in Putin's inner circle. Of course, we have Yevgeny Prigozhin, who you mentioned before. He was killed in a plane crash in 2023. He was one of Putin's closest confidants until he launched a rebellion also in 2023. Can you walk me through this change of relationship between these two and this rebellion?
Well, there are, of course, different views and different understanding what was happening in Russia with Prigozhin, who basically started an uprising on 24th of June 23. And my view was that this was an indication of a conflict between Nikolai Patrushev, the head of the FSB, and Vladimir Putin, and that, Patrushev basically ordered Prigozhin to behave a certain way, what Prigozhin done, and he paid life for this. And it seems to be that this very short battle between Patrushev and Putin, Putin won. But it's also questionable, and I will tell you why. Because on the one hand, Patrushev very soon left his position. On the other hand, his son, who is also the FSB officer, is a member of Putin's cabinet, and we do not know whether Putin keeps his son very close as a hostage or as a successor. So we will see. One day Patrushev's son becomes president of Russia, then we would know that Patrushev won that battle on 24th of June 23. If Patrushev's son ends in prison as a corrupt official, then we know that Patrushev lost that battle.
The relationship between Putin and Patrushev, as you mentioned, it's kind of complicated because what we know is that when Putin and Prigozhin were kind of in this fight, they met under mediation with Alexander Lukashenko in 2023. And not long after, we see Patrushev lose his position as security chief and almost get demoted to an aide to Vladimir Putin after being in that role for a number of years. So, Yuri, was that a testy situation that went on? Did it from afar, does it look as if there was some sort of conflict between the two and that he was demoted to an advisor?
Well, the conflict was obvious, and we know this because when Prigozhin stated that his troops, and actually there were not too much of troops, are moving to Moscow, Putin and Medvedev left the capital immediately. So they knew that something is going on. They left Moscow not because Prigozhin was trying to reach Moscow, he was very far away, but Putin knew that something is happening, so they left and they were, waiting until this coup d'état was over. Then, of course, we know that Patrushev participated in that conversation between Putin and Lukashenko and Prigozhin. So an agreement was reached. We do not know what kind of agreement was reached, and this is the main question which is still open. And under this agreement, Putin stated actually that Prigozhin is not going to be punished, that he is pardoned for whatever was done. And by the way, what was done was a big deal because they shut down a military plane, reconnaissance, very, very special military plane and 6 helicopters. So this was a big deal actually. And Putin stated that, well, no one is going to be punished for this. Fine. Then, of course, they punished Prigozhin. They shut down his plane. But it seems to be that for a moment Putin lost power, and it seems to be that probably Patrushev was trying, to take away some power from Putin. Whether he succeeded in this or not, we really do not know, because we are dealing with FSB officers who are playing games with each other, and it's very difficult to understand what precisely is happening. It seems to be that Putin managed to get back the control which he had, although once again we do not really know.
Another shake-up, Yuri, was the removal of the Minister of Defense, Sergei Shoigu, a 68-year-old. He had been in this role since 2012 when he was replaced by the Deputy Prime Minister, who had little military experience. And then Shoigu was then appointed to Russia's Security Council. The Kremlin's reasoning was that they said the Defense Ministry had to remain innovative. So can you talk me through this? Does it look like there was cracks forming between Putin and Shoigu?
Well, here's the story, and I will try to be very, very brief because this is actually a very interesting and complicated story. It seems to be that in Russia a private army was formed under the leadership of Prigozhin. Now, you have to understand that Russia is not a country where the government would allow a private army to exist. This is just impossible. Now, since we know that Prigozhin had this conflict with Minister of Defense Shoigu, we understand that this army actually was formed by the FSB, not by the Department of Defense. And the issue probably was financial as well, because the budget of this Prigozhin's army was absolutely huge. And on the day of mutiny, on 24th of June, Putin actually revealed a major state secret for which in normal days he should be arrested and put in prison. He openly stated that this Prigozhin's private army was actually financed by the Russian government, what the Russian government always, denied. And the budget for that army was close to $2 billion, something like this. It was absolutely huge. So when Putin realized that this private army, which exists under the FSB, became very, very powerful, he tried to take this army from the FSB and transfer it to the Ministry of Defense under Shoigu, sorry. And that's why and when this conflict started, because not only Patrushev and Prigozhin now would lose this private army, which is actually the FSB army, but they also would lose $2 billion of budget, which this army has. So that's when this conflict happened. That's when Prigozhin started to demand resignation from Shoigu. And at the end, speaking about winning or losing, well, Patrushev was removed, correct, but Shoigu was removed as well. Now, Belousov, which is a new Minister of Defense in Russia, is actually an economist and, a state leader, and he is not from military, he is not from the FSB. But I think his obligation is to be sure that Putin could continue to conduct this war against Ukraine as a permanent war, meaning that Belousov had to rebuild economy slightly so the army would have enough money, enough weapons, enough recruits to fight this war permanently as many years as possible. And I think Belousov is doing this again quite well from Putin's point of view.
Yuri, just a final question, because I can't keep you long, but do you see any more shake-ups happening in the next few months with Putin's inner circle?
In the circle, no, but I think Putin is out of options in many ways. I mean, Trump, of course, is saying that Ukraine has no cards, but I believe that both Putin and Trump, and in the Ukrainian question, have no cards at all. And I think Putin has probably several months to deal with Ukraine. Otherwise, he is facing a major crisis, because Europe is becoming stronger and stronger every day. And since for Putin, the Ukrainian war was just the beginning, it's very important for him, it was important for him to try to take control of Eastern Europe, the way the Soviet Union had this control. And what is important is September of this year, because in September, the Russian government and Belarusian government announced joint military exercises, similar to those which they announced in 21 and beginning of 22. And we know how this ended in 22. This military exercise happened to be a preparation for an attack, and it ended with the invasion of Ukraine. So if we see Russian troops in September of this year in Belarus again, this means either that Russia is planning the second attack against Kiev, or what is more probable, the invasion of Eastern Europe. So I think this September is going to be crucial.
We'll be having to watch that. Yuri Felshtinsky, thank you so much for joining the Putin Files today.
Thank you very much for the invitation again.